You think ignoring them is just silence. But silence, true, final, soul-deep silence, is a language they never learn to read. It's the one thing they can't manipulate. It's not cold. It's not revenge. It's not a game. It's the sound of someone who has finally stopped trying to be heard by someone who was never listening. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're still in it. The long nights pacing with your phone in your hand, typing and deleting, crying without sound, questioning yourself until your bones ache. Maybe you thought ignoring them would hurt you more than it would hurt them. Because you're the one who cares. You're the one who tried. You're the one who always stayed a little too long. But let me tell you a secret. Narcissists don't fear confrontation. They feed on it. What they fear, what truly dismantles them, is being dismissed, erased, not hated, not fought, not begged, just forgotten. When you walk away without screaming, without warning, without one last plea, that's when their world starts to crack. Because for the first time, they are left alone with the only voice they can't silence, their own, and they don't like what it says. You see, for them, you were never just a person. You were a mirror, a stage, a puppet, a supply. Your emotions were their script, your reactions, their fuel. They never loved you in the way you hoped they would. They loved how you made them feel about themselves. And when you stop performing, when the stage goes dark, they collapse, not in a dramatic, outward way that earns sympathy. Not always. Sometimes, it's subtle, slow, but inside, something breaks. Because without your validation, their mask slips and they're forced to face what they've spent their entire life escaping. This video is for the one who finally walked away, the one who stopped answering, the one who stopped trying to be enough for someone who was never even real. It's for the person who still wonders if they did the right thing, if ignoring them was too cruel, if silence makes you the bad one now. You are not cruel. You are not cold. You are not wrong. You are healing. And you're about to hear the story of what happens when the narcissist realizes their game is over, when they finally feel the weight of being truly, irreversibly ignored, when their spotlight dies and they're left to face the hollowness inside. Stay with me. Let your heart breathe. You've earned the right to know what happens when they're no longer in control, and you finally are. If this speaks to you, if something in your chest just said, yes, this is for me, then take a second to like this video and subscribe. Not out of obligation, but because this is a space where you're safe to feel, to remember, to rebuild. Take a breath. When you first go quiet, they don't believe it. They think it's another test, another round in the endless game they've trained you to play. They wait for the text at midnight. They wait for the apology that shouldn't even belong to you. They wait for the crack in your silence, because that's what always happened before. They don't panic at first. They smirk. They think, you'll be back. But as the hours stretch into days, and the days into weeks, something unsettling begins to stir. They start scrolling through your social media, checking if you're watching their stories, checking if you've left some hidden breadcrumb for them to follow. They look for proof that you're still orbiting them, that they still matter in your universe. And when they find nothing, that's the first fracture. Because deep down, narcissists aren't made of confidence. They're stitched together from scraps of borrowed praise, desperate approval, fragile masks, and silence. Your silence is like a hand pulling at those threads. One by one, it unravels them. The first sign of their collapse is restlessness. They can't sit still. Their mind races. Why aren't you answering? Who are you with? Did you replace me already? That gnawing insecurity, the one they projected onto you for so long, turns inward. For once, it's their own chest tightening at night, their own stomach in knots. They might lash out, sending sharp messages designed to provoke. Maybe they accuse you of things you haven't done. Maybe they try to guilt you, remind you of promises, or twist your kindness into a weapon. They're not really trying to win you back in that moment. They're trying to prove they still control your emotions. If they can make you flinch, cry, defend yourself, then silence is broken. Then they've won. But if you don't respond, if you hold steady, the mask begins to slip further. And here's the truth they'll never admit. Being ignored terrifies them because it mirrors the very wound they've been running from their whole life. Abandonment, unworthiness, the cold echo of not being chosen. For them, silence feels like a death sentence, because without attention, they don't know who they are. You were their mirror, and now the mirror has shattered. That's when the second collapse begins. The panic. They may suddenly shift strategies, sending apologies, love bombing, promising change, sweet words wrapped in desperation. They'll remind you of the good times, the laughter, the spark that hooked you in the beginning. They'll swear they see you now, that they've woken up, that they can't lose you. It sounds tender, but look closer. It isn't love, it's survival. Because the silence has begun to expose them, and they're fighting to cover the truth with whatever mask will work. But the silence keeps pressing in. It doesn't lie. It doesn't negotiate. And for the first time, you're not bending. You're not answering. You're not feeding the illusion. That's when they feel it, the hollow space where your attention used to be. And it scares them more than they'll ever show. Take a breath with me here. Let yourself remember those moments when you almost gave in, when your heart ached to reply, to soothe, to prove you weren't heartless. That pull wasn't weakness, it was the residue of their control. But look at you now. You're sitting here, listening, learning what really happens on their side of silence. And maybe, just maybe, realizing that the collapse you feared would be yours was always theirs. The collapse doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves, like a storm breaking against a wall that refuses to move. The third wave is anger, when they realize silence isn't bending, that no matter how sweetly they beg or how harshly they accuse, you remain still. Rage starts to boil. Because in their world, control is survival, and losing control of you feels like suffocating. They might lash out with words meant to cut deep. They'll dig into your old wounds, the ones they know by heart. They'll call you cold, selfish, ungrateful. They'll say you never loved them, that you're heartless for walking away. But don't mistake this for strength. That rage is not power, it's panic disguised as fire. Every insult is proof that your silence is working, that you've stopped playing, that their world is shaking. And behind the rage, there's something far more fragile. Fear. Fear of being ordinary without you. Fear of facing the emptiness when no one is left to reflect back an image they want to see. Fear that the person they told themselves they were never really existed. That fear eats at them. It's the hollow echo of every abandonment they've carried since childhood. And when your silence forces them to hear it, they crumble in ways you'll never fully see. Some of them will spiral outward, searching desperately for another source of supply. They'll try to replace you quickly, flaunt someone new, hoping the performance will reach your eyes. They want you jealous, reactive, broken. But if you stay silent, if you refuse to look, if you let them perform for an empty room, it doesn't feed them the way they hoped. It only deepens the void. Others will spiral inward, slipping into self-pity. They'll paint themselves as the victim. They'll tell anyone who will listen how cruel you were, how heartless you became. They need an audience, because the silence you left behind is unbearable. But even in the crowd, even with new ears to whisper to, the collapse still happens. Because none of it replaces you. None of it replaces the stage you once gave them. And here's the truth they'll never say aloud. They hate you for leaving, but they need you more than anyone else. Not because of love, but because your absence reminds them of the truth they can't escape. That truth, without someone to control, without someone to feed off, they are nothing but a shadow. And while they rage, while they scramble, while they pretend, you are beginning to breathe again. You're tasting your own silence, not as punishment, but as freedom. The silence they fear is the silence that heals you. So pause for a moment. Let yourself feel that power. The strength in your quiet, the dignity in not responding. The soft but undeniable truth that walking away wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Because the collapse they're experiencing now, that's the collapse you were carrying for years. And now, it's not yours anymore. After the anger fades, something darker creeps in. The fourth wave is desperation. It doesn't come with fire this time, it comes with pleading. They'll try softer tones, broken words, late-night messages that say things like, "I can't live without you. No one will ever understand me the way you did. Please, don't throw us away." And here's the cruel paradox. They don't miss you as a person. They miss you as an anchor, the steady force that held together the fragments of their crumbling self. They miss how you made them feel safe from their own emptiness. But you're no longer willing to carry that weight. When they realize that, desperation turns into chaos. Their patterns unravel. Sleep escapes them. Their mood swings between rage and tears, grand promises and cruel jabs. It's the sound of someone losing control over the only source of stability they ever had: your attention. They may even try to rewrite the past, to convince you that what you lived through wasn't as bad as you remember, that maybe you're exaggerating, that maybe you misunderstood. They'll twist the truth, because if you start doubting yourself again, then maybe they can slip back into your heart. But the silence holds. And with every unanswered call, every unread message, every moment of stillness, they're forced to face something they've avoided their whole life. Their collapse isn't just about you leaving. It's about the emptiness inside them finally catching up. The loneliness that was always there, masked with charm, with control, with noise. And now, there's no distraction left. No one left to blame. Only the raw truth staring them in the face. And while they break, you start to mend. Because silence doesn't just destroy them, it saves you. It's the space where you start hearing your own voice again. The voice that was drowned out for so long by their demands, their moods, their endless need. In the quiet, you remember who you are. You realize that love was never meant to feel like survival, that your worth was never meant to be proved again and again to someone incapable of seeing it, that walking away wasn't losing, it was choosing peace over chaos, choosing freedom over captivity, choosing yourself over a lie. Take a moment here. Let those words settle, because maybe for the first time in a long time you can feel the weight shifting, not on your shoulders anymore, on theirs. And that is the beginning of your liberation. The narcissist collapses when ignored because they lose their reflection. But you rise because you finally see yourself clearly. And once that happens, once you taste that freedom, there is no going back. The collapse deepens in silence, and by now, it begins to look like shadows chasing themselves in circles. This is the fifth wave: emptiness. At first, they fought it with rage, then with pleading, then with manipulation. But when none of it breaks through, something terrifying happens to them. They are left alone with their own reflection, and unlike you, who can sit in silence and find pieces of yourself again, they sit in silence and find nothing. That void has always been there. They've just spent their whole life outrunning it, filling it with attention, with chaos, with the devotion of people like you, people who gave and gave until there was nothing left to give. But silence strips away the distractions. There are no words to twist, no reactions to harvest, no audience to perform for. Just the echo of their own hollow self, and it crushes them. Because while you are healing, piecing yourself back together in the quiet, they are unraveling. They don't know how to exist without someone else to define them. They don't know who they are when the mask slips and there's no one to clap, no one to beg, no one to soothe. It feels like death to them, but not the kind of death that brings peace. The kind that gnaws endlessly, like a hunger that can never be fed. Sometimes they'll try one last grand gesture, a desperate attempt to drag you back into their orbit. Maybe they show up unexpectedly. Maybe they send gifts. Maybe they try to weave tragedy into their story: illness, crisis, a plea for help. Anything to make you feel guilty for walking away. But here's the truth. It isn't love. It isn't change. And it isn't real. It's survival. It's the last flare before the dark. And if you stay silent, if you refuse to bend, to rescue, to reopen the door, you'll witness the quiet collapse that narcissists can't escape. The part they never want you to see. They shrink. The loud, confident, untouchable figure begins to wither. They seek new mirrors, new distractions, but nothing sticks. Nothing fills the silence you left behind. Because it wasn't just your presence they relied on, it was your belief in them, your willingness to see the best in them, even when they showed you the worst. That belief was the thread holding their mask in place, and when you cut it, everything falls apart. Meanwhile, you begin to feel lighter. Your silence is no longer heavy, it's a sanctuary. You breathe deeper. You smile without permission. You find pieces of joy that don't depend on anyone else's approval. And in that stillness, you start to understand something powerful. Ignoring them wasn't cruelty. It was truth. It was love. Love for yourself. And that is something no narcissist can ever take from you. There's a moment, sometimes months later, sometimes years, when the collapse settles into its final stage. This is the sixth wave, the quiet unraveling. By now, they've tried everything. Anger didn't pull you back. Begging didn't work. Manipulation fell flat. Even their grand displays of moving on, flaunting someone new, never broke your silence. And so, what remains? Nothing but the truth they've run from their whole life. And that truth is simple. Without control over you, they are powerless. It's not that you were their whole world, though they may have said that. It's that you were their reflection, their proof of importance, their evidence that they mattered. You kept their emptiness hidden, and when you withdrew, the mask fell away, and they were left staring at their own fractured soul. They may pretend otherwise, of course. They'll laugh too loudly in public, post carefully crafted photos, spin stories about how much better their life is without you. But those who know how to look closer can see at the cracks in their smile, the restless energy in their eyes, because deep inside, the silence still haunts them. And here's the part you need to hold on to. While their collapse is ongoing, yours has already transformed into renewal. You've discovered something they never will: the strength of your own silence. What was once a weapon they feared became your medicine. You learned to sit with yourself, to face the echoes, and to find peace in them. The silence that tore them apart has been knitting you back together. Think of how far you've come, from pacing the floor at night with your phone in your hand, to sitting in the stillness with your heart steady. From questioning your worth, to knowing deeply, undeniably, that you were always worthy. From believing their collapse would destroy you, to realizing it was never yours to carry. This is what narcissists can never understand. Ignoring them isn't about punishment. It isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about stepping out of the endless performance, turning off the spotlight, and choosing life outside their stage. They collapse when ignored, not because of you, but because of the emptiness they refuse to face. And you rise in that same silence, because you finally faced your own pain and found the courage to heal it. So if you're listening now, wondering if you did the right thing, if walking away was too cruel, if your silence makes you heartless, remember this. You did what they could not. You faced the quiet, and instead of collapsing, you grew. You chose yourself, and that choice is the most powerful act of love there is. There's something almost poetic in how silence works. For years, maybe even decades, the noise of the narcissist filled your world. Their voice, their demands, their moods, every moment you lived was measured by how they felt. You forgot the sound of your own laughter when no one was watching. You forgot the rhythm of your own heart when it wasn't being pulled in 1,000 directions. But when you finally stop responding, when you finally hold that silence and don't break it, a new sound begins to surface, your own. At first it's faint, a whisper beneath the noise of old habits, the urge to check your phone, to replay old conversations, to wonder if you were too harsh, too unforgiving. But the longer you sit with it, the louder it grows. Until one day, you catch yourself smiling without thinking, or laughing at something small, or breathing without that weight pressing down. That is the sound of freedom. Meanwhile, the narcissist's collapse grows heavier, because where your silence gave birth to yourself again, theirs leaves them hollow. They don't know how to rebuild in quiet. They don't know how to sit with emptiness and learn from it. They only know how to run, how to search, how to consume. And so their collapse is endless, a cycle of reaching for mirrors that keep breaking in their hands. And this is where you see the truth of the whole journey. The silence that broke them is the same silence that saved you, because healing doesn't happen in noise. Healing happens in the still moments, when you're no longer reacting, no longer chasing, no longer proving. Healing happens when you realize the most powerful statement you can ever make is not with words, but with absence. Absence of begging, absence of explaining, absence of performing. And in that absence, something grows. A strength you never thought you had. A love for yourself that was buried under all the noise. A peace that doesn't need anyone else's permission to exist. So let yourself breathe that in. You've walked through the fire, through the storm, through the collapse that you thought would shatter you. But look where you are now, listening, learning, reclaiming, and maybe for the first time in a long time, you can see it clearly. The collapse was never yours. It was always theirs. And you are rising. And now, let's talk about the part that nobody sees, the aftermath. Because once the narcissist has collapsed, once their anger, their pleading, their grand performances have burned out, life doesn't suddenly become simple. Not for them, not for you. For them, the emptiness lingers like a shadow. They move from one distraction to another, one person to the next, searching for what they lost in your silence. But it never lasts. It never fills. Every new stage grows dim. Every new audience grows tired. And behind the curtain, they're still the same fragile child, desperate to be held, yet incapable of holding anyone else. And you're left with the echoes, not of them, but of you. The version of you who bent, who pleaded, who tried so hard to love someone into wholeness. The version of you who thought silence was cruel, who thought ignoring them was punishment, who thought leaving meant you'd lose yourself forever. But here's the truth, you didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. It's strange, isn't it? How silence feels unbearable at first, how it feels like drowning. But then slowly, day by day, it becomes the water you float on. It becomes the space where your own voice starts to come back, where your own dreams, your own desires, your own worth begin to surface. That is what they could never give you, because they were never capable of giving it to themselves. And maybe you still wonder, do they ever really feel it? Do they ever regret, or break, or finally see what they lost? Yes, but not in the way you wish they would. Not in the way that brings closure or justice. Their collapse isn't clarity, it's chaos. It isn't growth, it's emptiness. They feel the loss, but they don't learn from it. They ache, but they don't transform. They chase, but they never find. And that's why your silence matters. Not because it punishes them, but because it frees you. Because it breaks the cycle where you keep pouring into a cup with no bottom. Because it teaches you that love is not meant to destroy you, and survival is not the same as intimacy. So when you sit in the quiet now, remember, what crushed them is what rebuilt you. What they feared most is what set you free. And the collapse they experienced, That was never yours to carry. You didn't just ignore them. You chose yourself, and that choice is where the healing begins and where it never has to end. There's a certain beauty in endings that narcissists will never understand. For them, endings are losses, humiliations, wounds to their pride. They see someone walking away not as an act of courage, but as betrayal. They interpret silence as cruelty, not survival. Their world is made of control, so when you leave, when you stop answering, when you disappear into your own life, they cannot comprehend it as strength. To them, it is collapse. To you, it is rebirth, because you didn't just walk away from them, you walked back towards yourself. Think about it. The very silence that drove them into rage, into panic, into despair, what did it do for you? It gave you the first taste of peace you had forgotten was possible. It gave you mornings without fear, nights without walking on eggshells, moments that belonged entirely to you, and slowly you realized something powerful. Love should never require you to abandon yourself. That's what narcissists can never grasp. They believe love is power, possession, a reflection that bends and shifts to suit them. But love is not about control. Love is about freedom. And when you stopped feeding them, when you stopped reflecting their endless hunger, you stepped into a love that was finally real, the love you chose to give yourself. Their collapse is the shadow side of your rise. Every time they spiral in emptiness, you root deeper in strength. Every time they scramble for control, you breathe easier knowing you no longer have to be controlled. Every time they chase noise, you lean further into the healing quiet. So if you've ever doubted it, if you've ever wondered whether ignoring them was the right thing, whether silence was too cruel, whether you should have done more, remember this. You already did more than enough. You already gave until you had nothing left. And choosing silence wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. The collapse was theirs to carry. The healing is yours to keep. And in time, you'll see it was never just about them. It was about you learning that you don't have to fight to be heard, or beg to be loved, or shrink to be accepted. You are enough in your quiet, enough in your strength, enough in your stillness. The silence that destroyed them has been your greatest teacher, and from here forward, the only collapse you'll witness will be behind you, in the shadows of a life you've already walked away from. You are free.